The VCSE Barometer survey. The sector's regular temperature check. Informed by VCSE organisations for VCSE organisations nationwide. Unlock insights for impact.
Thank you so much, everybody, and welcome to this is our 8th of our quarterly barometers. So we've done about 2 years, which is really nice. And thank you so much, everybody, for taking part. As ever, then we can't do this thing without people participating in the barometer. And for those of you that haven't been to these things before, the core aim really is to give insights for policymakers and practitioners based on real-time data. So this is about trying to get what's happening right now in the voluntary community social enterprise sector and really understanding things and be able to report this off to policymakers, but also yourselves as practitioners. I see a number of CEOs and trustees and other people in the chat as well. And we really want to, and I'll say a little bit more at the end about how we're trying to make this as useful as possible for you, is the quarterly temperature check of the sector, launched just 2 years ago, and we're working with Pro Bono Economics. And we've got Beth on the call, and she'll be talking about some of the topical questions, and it's also shaped by 14 other national organisations. The wave we're going to be talking about then was run between the 25th of September and the 15th of October, and had 431 participants. So this is our 8th wave that we've got. As you may have seen, then we've got a dashboard which is to provide you with interactive insights into seeing what's going on in the sector. You can filter it by size and by location and various other things like that. There's a link you should be able to click on the slide itself, but Ben's also just put that link in the chat as well. We're trying to make that as useful as possible, and I'll say again at the end about some of our ideas for evolving this. But yeah, please make use of that. Please send it out to other people that you know as well. And just seeing, that real-time information about what's happening as well would be great. And then the article that is related to, as you'll know, then our thematic topic was about skills on boards and really linking in with Trustee Week, which has happened recently as well, and really thinking a lot about boards. There's a click there to the article, and again, we'll put the details in the chat as well, and working it that way. And yeah, there's a comment just being put in the chat about what geographical area. So we cover the whole of the UK. Predominantly, most of the respondents come from England. You can filter it by different geographical areas. So at the moment, we're going by regions. We are looking to try to evolve that to even more narrow geographies, but that's always about trying to build up the response rates and things as well. So the more people participate, the more granular we get. But yeah, and you'll see the details in on the dashboard as well about numbers, etc. If we move on to the next slide, then please, Ben. So these are the headlines. So Ben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So as Daniel said, it's been around 2 years now since we launched the VCSE Barometer. So we thought for this wave, the headlines for this wave, we'll take a look at some of the trends that we've observed over the past 2 years. So around 3/4 of respondents in every single wave of the barometer so far reported income generation as a top 3 concern. And similarly, in every single wave, 2 in 3 reported an increase in service demand every quarter. So this combination of a struggling financial position with sustained increases in service demand could explain why over the next 3 months, 1 in 3 expect their financial position to deteriorate, and this is the highest that we've seen since February 2023 in wave 2 of the barometer. And that 1 in 3 expect to fall short of meeting demand over the next 3 months. So on to the top concerns. So obviously finding that 2/3 of participants have been experiencing sustained increases in demand every quarter for the past 2 years. It's no surprise then that almost half of wave 8 participants told us that increase in demand is a top concern, despite this being around a 3% decrease from wave 7. Obviously, income's up there, 76%. It's always at the top of the concerns list. And volunteer recruitment rounds off the third top concern with around 4 in 10 citing it as a key concern, almost identical to Wave 7. We've also noticed a slight increase in the proportion of organisations saying that the retention of paid staff and volunteers is a top concern compared to Wave 7. That's up around 3.5% to 4.5% from Wave 7. So we've already touched on that organisations are experiencing sustained increases in service demand over the past 2 years, and 2 in 3 have reported an increase in service demand over the past 3 months, and a similar proportion expect that demand to increase again over the next 3 months, and only 5% expect it to decrease. And that's kind of a common thing that we've seen every single wave. So when asked if they expect to meet this demand over the next 3 months, the majority of respondents, as you can see there, 56%, expect to meet it, but with limited capacity. More than 1 in 3 said they expect to fall short in meeting demand. So you can see there, 13% expect to fall significantly short, and 23%, almost a quarter, expect to fall slightly short. 8%, around only 1 in 12, expect to meet demand with significant spare capacity. And this is, as I said, this is kind of similar from wave to wave. Again, kind of a similar scenario to previous waves of the barometer. Organisations are reporting a mixed picture in their financial position over the past 3 months. So while 4 in 10 report an unchanged financial position, slightly fewer have reported improvements than Wave 7, and 1 in 3 expect their position to deteriorate over the next 3 months, which, as I said, is the highest observed since February 2023. So this one shows the actions taken due to rising costs. So 2 in 3 organisations have told us that their financial position has deteriorated due to rising costs, with slightly more small and medium organisations reporting deteriorations than large organisations. And around 4 in 10 said that they'd had to increase service prices and unexpectedly had to use reserves to cope with the rising costs. And a similar number are using financial reserves to cover operating costs currently. So this one is around the change in personnel numbers over the last 3 months. So the one at the top shows the change in volunteer numbers, and the one at the bottom shows the change in paid staff numbers. So similar to previous waves, this was almost identical to Wave 7. The majority reported no change in the number of personnel. Very few respondents reported drastic increases or decreases, as you can see, kind of 2 to 3% on either end. Despite this, that's so the quarter, just over a quarter, reported an increase in volunteer numbers, which is down around 4% from Wave 7, so a slight decrease. So the expectations about personnel numbers over the next 3 months are slightly more pessimistic. So there's fewer participants expecting increases, and there's more participants that expect decreases in both paid staff and volunteers. So while the majority report unchanged numbers in personnel, 41% of organisations are currently experiencing recruitment difficulties. So like previous waves, respondents say that employees are having to work increased hours, and some operations have had to be paused due to these difficulties. But we also noticed that a substantial proportion of respondents in this wave selected the other option. So we conducted some content analysis on these responses, and the majority of responses were focused on volunteer recruitment. So many respondents said that the number of volunteers were significantly down, and one mentioned down significantly compared to pre-pandemic levels. And respondents also suggested that there are fewer candidates because of shifting preferences and motives, something that we covered in one of the reports we did for Wave 6 on volunteering. And they also talked about the challenging funding landscape, which means that they're struggling to recruit and retain paid staff. But because of the issues with volunteer recruitment also, the reliance is shifting to existing volunteers who are having to take on more responsibilities and shoulder the burden. So in this, in some cases, as you can see from the quote here, this is pulling focus away from other areas of the organisation. So this person mentions that we've had to cut back on things like the website or paying for platforms like Just Giving. So it's having a knock-on effect in other areas of the organisation. So I'll pass over to Beth now from Pro Bono Economics, who's just going to talk you through the topical question set for Wave 8.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone. Lovely to meet you, if I haven't already. So as Ben said, we are Pro Bono Economics, and we work alongside the team at NTU with conducting this kind of analysis of each wave, and we like to focus a little bit more on those topical questions. So Ben, if you just want to pop on a little bit, there we go. So this wave coincided quite nicely with Trustees Week, and given all of the conversations that we are having across the sector about volunteering, these kind of recruitment challenges, retention challenges, we've been quite interested in thinking about governance and how are charity boards and their trustees doing in the current climate. So how are you all doing in the current climate as well? What role do boards and trustees play in supporting organisations? And we've been really exploring and kind of unpicking what kind of skill sets and experience are the sector sees across the board, quite literally, and also how we're thinking a little bit about where skills may be found from new recruitment. So we've been thinking a lot about how we've seen from the barometer that fewer than 4 in 10 charities have reported having full boards, which has left kind of almost 2/3, so 63% having at least one board vacancy. And that includes almost 1/4 of charities reporting, or just over 1/4, sorry, of charities reporting several vacancies on the boards. And this is you can really see that, sorry, but I could just move on one slide. This is particularly important for smaller charities, who find it particularly difficult to access the trustees they need. So here we can see the differentiation between the charities of different sizes. And here we can see that almost 1 in 10, so 8% of small charities have fully depleted boards. And one question we've really been thinking about here is, given that in smaller organisations, boards can quite often play a larger role in the everyday running of charities, in the everyday kind of like financial management or service delivery on the ground. What kind of impact is that having on organisations? And that's a question we particularly want to dig into a little bit more and find a little bit more about. And we've been really thinking about here what these vacancies, the challenges in recruitment of board members and trustees is having on the sector and on really organisations' confidence that their trustees are able to address current and future challenges. And here again, we're seeing a real difference for charities by different sizes. While it's really great that about 8 in 10, so 4 in 5 of large organisations agree that their boards have the right blends of skills, diversity, knowledge and experience. When you compare that to those smaller organisations, it's those smaller organisations which are really having that challenge. And I was really struck just from reading through the different responses to the survey, just about how recruitment really has become a challenge, particularly for different organisations, and really the kind of the burden almost that that's placing on particular board members or particular trustees, as well as CEOs. And as we see here, if one trustee leaves, the answers on how we're doing are suddenly very different. And then you're seeing that challenge really being playing out in those recruitment ways as well. And what's been particularly interesting has been to kind of disentangle what we mean by skill and what we mean by skill sets, and how different organisations are really feeling about this. And what has been particularly interesting has been seeing how many respondents have said that actually their board members are really skilled when it comes to those more traditional or core functions that we see from our board members. So whether that's in financial management and budgeting, identifying and managing risk, or legal and regulatory compliance, there's a particular sense that these are where charities are most confident in their board members' skills. And you can see from this particular chart here, the darker is where you're seeing a kind of a higher percentage of skills, or the higher percentage of the of people saying that that's what they feel confident in. So, for example, with the financial management and budgeting, it's more likely that charities are saying that yes, our board members are highly proficient in this. But interestingly, we've seen that there's been a kind of identification of skills gaps in some particular areas, and most particularly this has been in fundraising and income generation, where almost half, so 44% of charities have identified this as a critical skills gap, as well as marketing and communications, with almost 4 in 10 identifying this as a skills gap. And this is particularly interesting when we consider the kind of the wider landscape. We have spoken about in previous waves about digital skills being a real crucial skills factor that's coming in, and we're having more of these wider conversations. And I think, given, as Ben said, I think it's around 3/4 of charities are still identifying income as that crucial concern. The fact that we're seeing a skills gap in fundraising and income generation on our boards, that's a really important conversation for us to be having, and a real crucial bit of data for us to be talking about. And again, that's coming through in the more qualitative response to the survey, and that idea of kind of proactive responses to the wider fundraising landscape. Here we've got some responses where one CEO has said, "I would like the board to be more proactive and supportive with fundraising, not just turning up to board meetings." Another has said, "While it's really great that we are focusing on strategy or operational matters, putting it in the wider context of the funding and commissioning challenge is really important." And while it sounds as if we're really saying that there are some gaps here, it's also really important to think about, well, so many charities responding to this have been really acknowledging where they're actually making these changes, and we've been talking a little bit about what actions are being taken. And we know that the skills audit, where organisations are regularly asking where expertise is needed, is being carried out. However, 42% are only carrying out this kind of skills audit on an ad hoc basis. So, for example, when a board member leaves, it may be useful to think about implementing skills audits more regularly. There's also a wider question around training and development. And a question we have here has really been thinking about what roles can other organisations, can our infrastructure bodies play in supporting existing board members to develop their skills, to think about those kind of skills areas such as income generation or digital and marketing. And this is a question we've really been having, particularly in the light of, say, getting on boards closure this year, which is a real gap in the sector more broadly. And again, that final question, and it's something that we are consistently talking about again, is the need for partnership, as well as across the sector with different infrastructure bodies coming into play, as well as thinking a little bit about partners with other members of civil society. So, for example, what role can government play? What role can our civil service play in supporting trustee development? And as well, then thinking about the private sector. So really, this is a question not just for charities more broadly, but as well just thinking about how we engage across and within our other partners. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and any conversations.
Yeah, thanks for that, Beth. I'll just quickly touch on some of the other findings from our topical question set. So I'll try to be brief. So the first is around operational involvement, and I know Beth touched on this in terms of board members maybe getting a bit more involved in operational activities in smaller charities. And while most say that this involvement has remained stable over the past 2 years, 1 in 3 organisations have reported increased involvement in areas such as fundraising and community outreach and engagement. And in terms of skills, around half of all respondents say that the board hold only basic or no skills in fundraising, bid writing and evaluation impact. As Beth touched upon, skills of which these skills are becoming increasingly important in the current landscape. While fundraising skills were similar across different sized organisations, a large proportion of small organisations reported basic or no skills in evaluation and impact, significantly more so than medium and large organisations. Having said that, 3/4 of respondents told us that the boards are moderately or extremely effective in a range of those traditional areas that Beth was talking about, things like strategic leadership, supporting senior management, cooperation, and managing risk. So I'll hand back over to you, Daniel.
That's great. Thank you very much. So just in a quick way, wrapping this bit up then. So we're trying to develop the barometer and what we're doing. So you've got on the right-hand side there about when wave 9 will be, which is going to be between the 22nd of January and the 12th of February. So that's our next wave coming up, which should be our 9th wave. But the major thing I really want to say is we're trying to make the barometer as useful and as beneficial and as empowering for you, the users of this. So we've got a number of ideas that we are looking to explore. One of which is getting individualized reports so that when you complete the barometer, you get back a report that explores how you're doing in relation to other organizations, just as a way of conversation starter, particularly for the board. One of those ideas that we've got as well. We're going to be developing up our dashboard. So you've seen the dashboard. We're working on bringing in wider data sets and various other things like that over time as well. So one of our requests would be, we want to make this as useful as possible. So we'd like to make sure that this works for people like yourself. So we'd like to do some user testing really, which would be things like us emailing you examples of things or having conversations or other aspects like that. So on the next slide, we've got some of our contact details. So please get in touch. That's our email address there. As I say, we'd be really keen, and all of those are links so you can click on as well. But we're really keen to have conversations with you about how we make that as beneficial as possible, really, because the more we can make that useful, the better. And yeah, thank you very much for the person in the chat for being affirmative and saying that you'd like to be able to help out. We'd love to presentation.
See where you are in the big picture. Stay ahead of the curve. Join a community of changemakers.